Hello, world. Let me get Julie in here. All right. Let me see. Is this working? Oh
Oh
my God.
yeah.
How awesome. Okay. Now, can you hear me?
Yeah, I gotcha.
Okay, good. I got you too. I feel like a constant millennial
Oh
asking
my God.
if I can be
You
heard
made me fresh. So
or whatnot. So, well, welcome everyone who is watching so far. Um, I think you know who I am, Matt Lockman, owner of Cleveland Sex Therapy, licensed clinical therapist and supervisor, a sex certified sex therapist. And I want to introduce to you one of my closest friends and colleagues, Julie. I'll have you take it away in a second. But
I was
what
like, are
we're
you
going to
gonna
be
say
doing here,
Stephanie? You
yeah,
were starting
no,
with an S.
no, I was talking, I was going to try to like figure out like, okay, should I introduce you first or should we like tell everyone what we're going to be doing here over the next year?
There,
So,
go. Keep
you
going.
know, so I guess I'll just share that piece. So we are going to be hopping on either every week, a few times a month, just to sort of shoot the shit and talk about all topics related to sex and intimacy and relationships. So, so this is something Julie and I have wanted to do for a long time. I've known her for such a long time. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit and have you introduce yourself and whatnot.
Awesome. Yeah. Hello. I'm Julie Labanz. I own Be Known, which is a private therapy practice in Cincinnati, Ohio. Although our practice is totally remote, so this year I'm trying to be a little bit of a world traveler. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah,
I am a licensed professional clinical counselor and supervisor in Ohio and Kentucky, as well as a counselor in Florida. I am also an ASECT certified sex therapist and certified sex therapist supervisor, and also do all things sex and relationship therapy. That's been my thing, my whole journey. So
yeah.
excited to be partnering with you, Matt, to just talk to people about the shit that we just love to talk about, right? Like this is just a flow for us. So looking forward to diving into some stuff today.
Yeah, 24/7.
Yeah.
Julie and I have known each other for a very long time, or what feels like a long time. I guess it's been a short time since 2019. That feels long
It is
to
long.
some
It's
degree.
6 years now, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we went through our training together, which was our sex therapy training, which was very interesting to say the least. But we became very close friends. And a couple years after meeting each other, we ended up starting another business,
Oh, yeah.
the Institute for Sex Positive Therapy. I'm saying that right, yeah? Which is our education business. It's basically for mental health professionals, sex therapists to get continuing education credits if they want to learn more about sex, relationships, kink, polyamory, all of that. So it's pretty fun. We really like doing that work.
Yeah, I feel like that's what inspired this, right? Like we enjoy giving
Yeah,
that knowledge and information to clinicians, but we don't want to gatekeep any information. And a lot of times we're doing these trainings and are like, oh my gosh, so many people would benefit from knowing even just little nuggets from these, right?
right.
So this is a perfect way to try to help spread sex positive and accurate, factual, helpful information. Although,
Hmm.
meta is not fact checking anyway, so here we are. Um,
Jesus, tell me
but,
about it.
this is our efforts to try to bring our knowledge and wisdom to the general public as well.
Yeah, it's very cool. Um, it's very cool knowing somebody like Julie who this has been her entire professional career. I, on the other hand, started in community mental health work. Then I worked at the Cleveland Clinic for a little bit. Julie has been living and breathing sex therapy
Ever.
forever.
Yeah.
So,
Can't get enough of it. Gotta do it. It's
yeah.
so important. It's important work. So, yeah.
Okay. So we might as well get into this topic that we wanted to discuss today. Again, a lot of how these lives are going to work. Julie and I are just going to shoot the shit for a little bit and hang out and talk just in general about topics that we think are really important in the world of sex and relationship therapy. And so for today, I was texting, well, I was texting Julie last night and I was like, what should we talk about in some way, shape, or form? And I was like, you know what, we're just going to do the most basic sort of like our top three, I guess, tips, right? Like tips for sex therapy, tips for relationships, tips to talk to your partner about, just tips about sex in general. So yeah,
Mm-mm-mm.
so I
Love it.
figured we'd start there. So
Yeah.
I chose three. I feel like I could have chosen 100, but I guess I'll start with my first one, and that is good old responsive arousal, responsive desire, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think with almost every single one of my clients, and I talk to my interns and supervisees about this, there are some pretty standard pieces of information that I think I talk to every single client about,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Outside of HIPAA, right? Outside of my late cancellation policy, uh, um, I would say I always talk about responsive desire, right? And so, in essence, what that is desire is sort of broken down into a couple, multiple factions, but the main two tend to be spontaneous desire and responsive desire. Spontaneous is one that we all sort of know, that we see constantly in entertainment. That idea of just like, I look at somebody and all of a sudden I just want to bang. And I'm like, you want to bang, we're banging, we want it at the same time. We're going right up against, the washing machine or right outside the
Mm-hmm.
bar, right? This idea of like spark, and spark can occur, right? A lot of us do have spark, but I find that a lot of people forget that there's a whole other form of desire that we all have access to, which is that responsive desire, right? And that essentially is responding to cues in your environment, right? Emily Nagoski, who wrote the book Come As You Are, and the other one, Come Together, she wrote a stress book as well. I can't burn out, something
Burnout.
burnout, I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Um, she didn't create these concepts. She sort of just popularized them for the general public. And she talks about brakes and accelerators, right? So what are our turn-ons and turn-offs? And we forget that that is how we respond to our partners in the environment that can help really turn us on. And so I love that concept. I don't know what you think about that,
Oh, for
Julie. You talk to
sure.
your clients all the time.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think people sometimes read it or talk about it and think, I am responsive desire. I am spontaneous desire. Like they
Mm,
want to put themselves into these boxes. And I think it's important for folks to remember that we're not one or the other. We have access to both for the most part, right? Now,
mhm,
somebody who's ACEs might not typically feel any sort of spontaneous desire. It really might take, some intentionality, but
mm,
most people at some point have experienced spontaneous desire on some level and at times might just feel it. I particularly hear vulva owners talking about experiencing it when they're ovulating. Not
mm,
true for everybody, but some folks are like, just like this random one time a month, they feel like real
mm,
ready. And then
mm,
I go a whole month cycle without wanting to have sex with my partner because I don't feel it. I'm not feeling it, right? So I think it's important for everybody to remember that as you're learning about these two different types, it's not exclusive. You don't fit in one box or the other. You can access both at different times in life.
mhm.
But responsive is
Losing
definitely
your
one that we
voice.
see. Yeah, I know my morning voice. Responsive is one that we see in everybody. And I think that's also a misconception is that, oh, penis owners
Mm,
are spontaneous desire, vulva owners are responsive. Not true at all.
yeah.
I what I've found is that people who experience spontaneous desire are more often folks who are thinking about sex or learning about sex or talking about sex or exposing themselves to sex. So it's no wonder, if somebody's watching a lot of porn or if somebody is reading a lot of erotica
Mm,
or
mm,
talking to their friends or their partners about sex, spontaneous desire is going to feel a little bit easier to tap into versus
mhm.
responsive desire. So I think there are just like different
Yeah.
misconceptions around who fits into what box when there is no box.
Yeah, and this idea too that I see this often. One person will come in and they'll be like, I'm spontaneous, that's who I am. And then the other person will come in and they'll be like, I'm responsive, that's who I am.
Hmm.
And they both sort of look at each other and they're like, okay, which one of us is changing?
Yeah,
Who's
yeah,
going to change?
yeah.
And that tends to be another misconception is that we have to sort of change and learn all of these different ways when in reality, no, no, no. If you are more comfortable engaging in, this spontaneous desire and your partner is more comfortable in this responsive space, we just have to figure out how to communicate about that, right? We're
Hmm.
never going to turn a responsive person into this high, high, high spontaneity. Like that is this just huge misconception.
Hmm. Yeah, which I think hits on another one of the tips that you had of scheduling versus
Mm,
spontaneity. I think that's really a key component when I'm working with folks in relationships about figuring out how do we align.
mhm.
Scheduling over spontaneity can be pretty helpful. So I wonder if you can hit on that a little
Yeah, yeah,
bit.
yeah. Just jump into my second one. Love this. Yeah. So my second sort of uh, tip, and this I think I love this one so much because it goes against what everyone thinks too. This idea
Yes.
of, scheduling sex, right? If I hear one more time how awful scheduling sex is, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? It's just that is such this like message that is passed on through this idea that sex and arousal desire need to be spontaneous, and they just don't have to be. And so scheduling sex, and why I sort of always loop it together with scheduling and spontaneity, is because there is a beauty in sort of me going to my partner saying, hey, we're so busy in our lives. There's so much going on. We have all these work responsibilities. We have all these like friendship responsibilities, family responsibilities, hobbies, things we want to do. Why don't we schedule sex for like Saturday morning? How does that sound? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds great. Now, I can see for some people that can build anxiety, that can build pressure, that can sort of create some traps, which 100% we would need to work through. But the beauty of this is if we're scheduling it Saturday morning, I know mentally, okay, I can show up and be in this sexual space. He can as well. And then the beauty of this too is we can still be spontaneous, right? I can bring something spontaneously to the space, right?
Mhm.
And so can he. And that again can just start us on that dopamine roller coaster.
Yeah, and the nice thing about it too is that you can then manage your energy a
Yeah.
lot better, right? So it's definitely twofold for folks who often feel like they have responsive desire. I'll hear them say like, "Oh, like I get anxious thinking about like, oh, I got to meet this deadline with my partner." And so I'll talk to them about scheduling intimacy
Mm,
instead of sex, right? Let's take the pressure off of there needs to be a certain action that happens in this window. And so if
yeah.
we're just scheduling intimacy, anything could happen. Maybe we just like make out a little bit, or maybe we just give each other a foot massage, or we go through intimacy cards,
Yeah.
right? And see where it leads. The hope is that maybe that'll turn into sex, but no pressure, right? Like,
Hmm.
can we just schedule time to be intimate?
Hmm.
Because it takes time to
Hmm.
drop in.
Yeah.
And on the same side of that, if we're planning it, I'll also hear responsive folks say, people who often experience responsive desires say that I love that I can then manage my day, right? Because they're
Mm,
like, if I know we're gonna have sex, I can either be thinking about sex earlier in the day to get myself in the mood, or I can make sure that I take a nap in the afternoon, so I'm feeling a little bit
mm,
more energized by the evening,
yeah.
or I can, again, manage my to-dos, whatever, right? Like there's so
Yeah.
much benefit at times to scheduling to help people manage their energy to show up really well in that space.
You bring up such a good point too. It's not just about
Mhm.
scheduling sex, it's about
Mhm.
scheduling intimate time
Yeah.
together, right? Can we schedule cuddling on the couch? Can we schedule giving each other massages? Can we schedule these intimacy cards, right? Um, yeah. So I would literally was thinking, I was like, that sort of goes into, if I remember correctly, one of your first tips, right? Which is the communication
Oh,
piece,
yeah.
right? You're like, what are
I
you
was like,
talking
wait,
about?
I was thinking about my order, and I was like, that
Yeah.
wasn't my first one.
Oh,
No, that
okay.
makes sense. No, it
Well,
doesn't matter.
why don't I just wrap up my third
Oh,
one and then we'll jump into your third? How
yeah,
does
sure,
that sound?
go.
Okay, cool. We do this all the time. Um, so my third sort of tip, right? Again, these are sort of the top three tips that I have that I sort of preach to all my clients, the top three tips that Julie has that she preaches to all of her clients. My third one is this is a hard one, but stay away from toxic media, right?
Yes.
The one of the hardest things that I think we deal with as certified sex therapists is that we are fighting sort of global messaging around the world, and especially in the United States. I tell my clients, you walk into my office, you are going to get 50 minutes of sex positivity, openness, inclusive language, trying to create this safe space, right? I'm going to hold you as much as I can, metaphorically. We can't touch our clients. That's another one. People think sex therapists can just like touch their clients all the
That's
time. No.
funny.
We should talk about that in a future live.
Sure.
Anyways, sorry. So I'm going to hold you in this space, and then you're going to leave my office and you are walking right back into the world of sex negativity. You're walking right back into the world of messaging like, I must find a relationship. I must like have sex. I must know exactly what I want all the time. I need to look a certain way. I need to be a certain way. I need to act a certain way, right? You then go home and you turn on these TV shows that promote all of this misinformation around what creates healthy relationships and structures and how am I supposed to engage, and let me play games, let me withhold sex, maybe that's something that's going to work,
Mhm.
right? And so there's a blog on my website, right, that is sort of how to just live a sex positive lifestyle, sex positive influences, books, TV shows, social media accounts, because we want to start creating this messaging around us, this web of sex positivity, and coming to therapy and talking to sex therapists, that's going to help. But
Mhm.
this toxic messaging, we really need to sort of get a handle on.
Yeah, which flows into one of my first tips, which was sex
Yeah,
positivity, right? I think exactly to your point, Matt, there's so much sex negative media, there's so much misinformation. Matt and I are constantly debunking myths that people come in with. One of those things being spontaneous desire is
yeah,
like the way, right?
yeah,
But another one I'll talk to a lot of clients about are I will have vulva owners in a relationship with the penis owner, and oftentimes it's like, if there's a boner in the room, we have to do something about it. And it's like, and
right,
no, leave it alone. Let the boner be there. Let it go
yeah.
away, right? Like,
Let
we
the
don't get
boner
the
be.
let the boner
Let
be.
the boner
Like,
be.
there doesn't need to be pressure, right? So I think there are a lot of messages that are sex negative. I mean, so many folks, particularly in the United States, don't get accurate, helpful sex education that we're having to debunk. There can certainly be a lot of like cultural or religious messaging that we're having to debunk.
Yeah.
I just learned this week, which is a whole other topic, but that the labia minora goes away for women as they get older during menopause. And I'm like, there's all
Okay.
this media messaging about how
Yeah.
our vulvas are
Yeah.
supposed to look perfect and pretty and all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are. Like, I didn't even know I'm going to be losing bits, right? So, all that to say, that's why we need sex positive educators, right? This was a sex positive educator giving people this information. We don't get any of it. And so it's so important to be sex positive in our own lives and to get sex positive education so
Yeah.
that we're showing up with helpful information in the bedroom, right? Otherwise, we're going to often be disappointed about things that aren't even accurate and helpful to our reality.
You know, that reminds me, Julie knows this pretty well. I just started a weekly column for Cleveland Scene Magazine called Ask a Cleveland Sex Therapist.
Love it.
Um, and it drops every Monday. This one just dropped this morning, the newest one. But what's what's very interesting is the second one that I posted was entitled "Should Cheating Always Lead to the End of a Relationship?" Right? And just speaking to your point of sex positivity, right, and staying away from toxic messaging. I had a lot of people reach out. They loved it, right? It was reshared a lot. There were a lot of likes. I got a lot of followers from it. But there were so many haters on it
Mhm.
because, and you could tell they didn't even read the article. Like
Mhm.
they didn't even click on it to even open it. They were just trolling, right? Saying certain things that they thought would be hurtful. Wasn't hurtful. I have very good boundaries in this space. But to your point, this is such a product
Mhm.
of why we need to be more sex positive and why we need to pass laws and create these sort of legislations and this lifestyle where we are promoting this idea of
Mhm.
sex and understanding it, not shying away from it, not trying to gatekeep it in a way that then causes people to jump out and say these really wild things.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll say one more point on sex positivity as well, along those lines, is we always talk about not yucking someone's yum,
Mm,
right? The idea of we are all autonomous people. And if many of us are autonomous people. And if we choose to engage in something, as long as no one is being harmed and everything's above board, no one's being hurt, no one's being abused, we don't need to shame anybody's interests or sexual
yeah,
desires. That's important in the context of a relationship. So often when couples that I have are talking about their different kinks and explorations, they're like, I'm so afraid to share with my partner because they judged me this one time, or maybe somebody else judged me one time. And that sits with people for a long time, a
yeah,
long, long time. Sex is so vulnerable. And
yeah,
so if we're being negative towards our partners or towards other people about sex, it can be really difficult. So bringing your sex positive energy, bringing your lack of judgment, whether it's in your relationship or with a friend who's maybe seeking advice or anybody,
yeah,
right? Like our words carry so much weight. So we need that sex positivity to really help people flourish and have, I don't
yeah.
know, just like good sex. We don't need to be shameful about it.
I don't see ever getting fisted in my life on the journey of my life,
Yeah.
right? I don't see that happening. And that's okay for me.
Mhm.
I'm allowed to hold that space and be like, you know what? Maybe I'll try it one day, but maybe I won't. The problem shows up is if I'm sitting and I'm in this group of people and I'm saying, you are
Mhm.
disgusting because
Mhm.
you like that,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
That's where it shows up in a space of like, ooh, now we are
Mhm.
leaving sex positivity and entering this space of sex negativity filled with shame.
Exactly. Yeah. Ugh. So that's
Yeah.
definitely one of my big tips when it comes to talking to folks. I know we blended both
Yeah.
of ours together, but
That's
avoid
good.
toxic media
Yeah.
as best you can.
Yeah.
And sex positivity is a big one. It's super
Yeah.
important.
I think you have two more.
I do. I do. So one is just communication,
Mm,
right? So as you know, Matt, when we're working with folks, so many people are not talking about their sex. They're not having conversations. They're not debriefing to say what worked, what didn't work. They're not talking about what they like, what they're interested in. Often, if they're ever talking about anything, it's how unhappy they are with their sex. And we know from
hmm
research that for every negative, we need five positive to counterbalance it. So if you're having a bunch of negative
Right.
conversations about sex and nothing positive, we're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
And the only way that your sex is going to grow and improve is if you get to talking to each other about it, getting curious with each
Yeah.
other rather than challenging one another about, what do you like? And maybe some people are like, I don't know what I like. That's totally fine. Let's talk about
Mm-hmm.
like what's a movie scene that turned you on
Sure.
recently? Or what's an excerpt from a book that you've read that really
Mm,
excited you? Or something that like sparks conversation that has no pressure. And I think that's really important is whether you schedule weekly times or monthly times to have conversations about sex, or you just kind of casually have it. I think the more that you can just kind of naturally weave it into your conversations, the better.
yeah.
So, That's what I'm trying to encourage my folks to do. But man, I don't know about you with communication with folks, how you're maybe encouraging them to like
Yeah.
talk about it.
All the time,
Mhm.
right? We need to talk and talk and talk and talk. You cannot over communicate when it comes to sex, right? We need to get to this place. Well, maybe we kind of sex therapists with
I was going to say,
our
yeah.
partners are
And
probably
like,
like, please,
shut
for the
up.
love of God, can you stop
Yeah.
talking about anal? Anyways, so this idea of communicating is so important. And I also, we understand how hard it is,
Yeah.
right? It's really hard to put yourself in a vulnerable space,
Yeah.
right? Imagine you're meeting somebody for the first time. It can be difficult, again, due to sex negativity, lack of sex education, to put yourself into the space of like, I actually like this is really important to me when it comes
Mhm.
to sex. I really need or want X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
So you hold it in, right? And then you just engage and you engage because you put sex on the back burner.
Mhm.
And then over time, what we see, passion is almost always going to fade in relationships, right? The honeymoon phase is going to end, new relationship energy is going to pass. And we've built such high commitment, and passion is so low that it's sort of drained away. And that can feel even harder to
Mhm.
step in and
Mhm.
to be vulnerable
Mhm.
and to talk. I just wrote in this most recent article how, what was this example I used? I think I said, you know, how does a wife turn to her husband and say, I really want you to tie me up when I'm also the mother of your children and we've been together for so long, right?
Mhm.
We hold so many different identities and they put so much different pressure
Mhm.
on us. And so this idea of like scheduling just more communication, whether it's weekly, whether it's through intimacy, communication, cards or decks, I love all of it.
Yeah, card decks are great because I often have people being like, I don't know how to start the conversation. And I totally
Yeah.
get that because it is kind of vulnerable. It's kind of like, And
Mm-hmm.
so even just saying like, hey, I grabbed like a couple of these intimacy cards. Let's just pick a couple random ones because then no one's on the pressure to have asked a certain question. We're putting it on the cards.
Yeah.
Or, I think just pulling from anything. Oh, hey, I watched this random Instagram live today, or I listened to this random podcast today. Like, you don't have to pull in like let's do this specific sexual
Yeah.
act, right? You can pull in, I was learning this about sex today. I learned that the labia minora is going to go away, right? Like it doesn't matter. I freaked out
I
about it.
I don't know about you, but I usually love and I don't get upset when I've been talking to my clients constantly. For example, I'm like, hey, we need to like communicate more about sex. Like, let's work on like building that courage, taking that risk, and let's just like go and do it. And we have session after session after session. And then they come in one session and they're like, you know what? I just listened to this podcast on the importance of communicating and I'm just going to do it,
Love,
right?
love
I
that for
know
you.
I know some therapists who are just like so pissed that that happens. And for me,
No.
I sort of laugh at it because I'm
Yeah.
like, yes, I know we've been talking about this, but I also know how suffocating sex negativity is and how suffocating um, yeah, insecurities and shame can be. So, yeah, listen to me, listen to Julie, listen to podcasts, listen to anybody who is going to provide you that space.
Yeah, definitely. It's just something that needs to happen and whether it's at the beginning of the relationship, amazing, or if you've waited all this time, it's fine, but just like pull it in, pull it in. It'll get
Hmm.
easier. And if you are someone who has kids or wants to have kids, the more comfortable you get talking to your partner about sex, the easier it's going to be to then eventually talk to your kids about sex because they're going to need some sort of sex positive role model in those conversations as well.
Totally.
All
Okay, I think
right,
we have
last
one
one.
more, right? For
Yeah.
people new people who've joined, Julie and I have sort of been sitting and talking about our favorite tips. Megan just said, "Hey guys, hi Megan."
Hey.
Um, Megan from Cleveland Sex Therapy.
Woo.
We're just sort of talking about our three favorite tips a piece as sex and relationship therapists. Hello, Dr. Stacy Leatham. She's amazing as well. So. Julie, I think we have one more. So what's your last tip?
What was my last?
What was your last tip?
I didn't write it
Um,
down. Sex positive, communicate. Dude,
I
I'm
didn't
so
write
used
it
to you taking
down.
notes for me.
I know. It's on
Okay.
my phone. I didn't write it down though.
I was like, I could talk about the orgasm gap, but that's a whole thing for a different day. All
Yeah.
right, here we go. Oh, pleasure over performance.
Oh,
Definitely. That's such a classic.
duh.
Duh.
Let's do it.
So, pleasure over performance, I think that fits a lot with scheduling over spontaneity, right?
Yeah.
Like, a lot of folks get so hung up on the need to have an orgasm. Like, that's the important, that's the end goal, or the need to make sure that there's an erection, or my partner has to orgasm, otherwise, I am not well. As far as like it hits your self esteem, right? Of like, I'm
Yeah.
not doing a good job, right? So, what's so important to talk to folks about, and we just do, is pleasure over performance, right? Again,
Mm-hmm.
that idea of scheduling intimacy over sex. If we can change the goal of sex, oh my gosh, you can have some fun
Right.
sex if you stop making it about a penis or about a vagina or about, like about certain parts, right? Things having to like fit in certain
Yeah.
ways.
Yeah.
So it's really important to like get people experiencing pleasure. And so by that, I'll sometimes tell people have a session where you're not, if you're penetrative in any way, typically, that you're not penetrative at all.
Mm-hmm.
Explore, add blindfolds, tie each other up,
Mm-hmm.
like add like some tantalizing, some teasing, like do anything that doesn't involve what you normally would consider your sexual script, right?
Yeah.
Change anything. So I think that's just a really important one. And I'm sure, Matt, you've got 1,000 thoughts on it.
Totally.
Also, hi
As
to our new
always.
friends. Hi,
Yes.
Stephanie. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, I think, Julie, we talk a lot about, and I tell my clients, an orgasm is like 5% of an
Yeah.
overall sexual experience. It's a
Mhm.
fun 5%. It can be really great. But that 95% is you just engaging, right? You being mindful, you moving into this space in your body where you can actually feel this pleasure.
Mhm.
And so when we focus too much on this performative aspect of it, right? Whether it's I have to make my partner orgasm. I must moan. I must look like this
Mhm.
porn I just watched, or I need to do this. Maybe if I like flip my hair in this way, or whatever it is, we're disconnecting, right? We're
Yeah.
sort of losing that space,
Mhm.
and it can show up to us creating a certain script around sex that it
Mhm.
becomes less so about us and more so about the other person.
If even that, it could just be about
Yeah,
society, right? It's
sure,
like, oh, I just
sure.
want to do whatever society says that I'm
Right.
supposed to do. And it's like, then are either of you really having good sex? And that's why we have to talk about it, right? Check in.
Yeah,
Like, is this good? Is this working for you?
yeah,
But we also know from research, like, we need novelty in our
yeah.
relationships. We need it, right? And that's true of sex. It's true. Any habit, anything that we get into, if we do it the same way every time, it's going to get boring,
Hmm.
right? And that's just how our brains are literally wired. That's not anyone's fault. It's just how our brains operate. So we
Yeah,
have to change it up. And so instead of focusing on a specific outcome, changing the way that you engage with each other that doesn't have a certain goal in mind can be a big game changer for folks. So,
100%. Hmm.
dopey. Okay.
Love this.
Yay.
Um, Anything else, Julie? We've been talking for a while. I mean, we can always just
We
talk
could
and talk and
always just
talk.
talk
I
forever
know.
and people will be like, all right, y'all.
All right.
No, I think these are great. I think
Okay.
these are great 6 tips to keep in mind, whether you're
Yeah.
a clinician yourself talking to clients or whether you are just a person wanting to figure out how to enhance your sex life in some way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. These are easy starting points, no pressure to need
Hmm.
everything to take every single one of these tips and apply them, right? Pick one and just work on it for a
Yeah.
couple of weeks, right? Like changing this narrative is going to take time. I
Hmm.
mean, again, as Matt said, I've been doing this forever now, for 8 years. And that I dismantled a lot of stuff over that time. So the fact
Yeah.
that this is easy and flows for me, also shout out to having sex positive parents, but like it
Yeah.
takes time to
Yeah.
change our mindset and our frame of mind. And I'm still learning and growing, as are you, Matt. So
Yeah.
be gentle with yourselves in this
Hmm.
process.
Yeah. So as a reminder, um, Julie and I are gonna hop on here. We're gonna try to do weekly. If not, we're gonna do a couple times a month, just
Mhm.
because again, we love talking about this stuff and we love providing sex positive spaces for all of you to come and listen to us talk about specific topics and have these sort of conversations. But Julie, why don't we just wrap up with reminding people what our tips were again, right? So
Yeah.
if you
No,
can. So my three were responsive arousal, right? Understanding that, desire does not just have to be spontaneous, that you can sort of hold it and then sort of navigate depending on your brakes and accelerators. Scheduling sex is absolutely fine. It is not the most boring thing in the world, and you can still be spontaneous while scheduling. And then lastly, mine was staying away from toxic media because there's just so much toxic shit that exists in the world, and we need to put ourselves into spaces where we are not feeling more shame.
for sure. Yeah. And then mine was bleeding right out of that. That sounds weird, was just blending with that.
Yeah,
Someone's dying.
bleeding. It was just really
Yeah.
bleeding.
Oh, yay. So sex positivity, right? So not yucking people's yums, like really just trying to put yourself around sex positive information to continue to encourage you to embrace the sex that you want to be having, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then my second one, Matt, it's too much pressure. What are my things?
Your second one's communicating. Communicating about sex.
Communicating around sex, making sure that you're talking not only to your partner, right, but talking to other people in your lives, encouraging them to have positive conversations. But again, if you're feeling anxious about bringing sex up with your partner, using intimacy cards or using like a podcast or a blog or something that you've already accessed earlier as a segue. And
Yeah.
then the last one, I just want to say scheduling versus spontaneous. And it's not. Say it for me.
Pleasure
Pleasure over
over
performance.
performance.
I can't today. Guys, I just got back from a whole week long of
Yes,
different time zones, so my
you
brain's a
did.
little bit mushed right now. Pleasure over performance. So, really making sure that you're not sticking to a specific script,
Mm-hmm.
but really changing up your sexual script. We need novelty. And so that means just trying something different and taking out the pressure of sex having to look a specific way. Make it look the
Yeah.
way that feels good to you on any given week.
Yeah.
And all of that to say, if you all have any topics that you would like us to hit on, that you're really
Oh yeah.
interested in, want us to talk about, I often tell folks I am an umbrella sex therapist, which I think, Matt, you are as well.
Yeah.
We've just had to learn so much over the course of time. There's typically not a topic that we couldn't talk to you about in
Mm-hmm.
some level. So please let us know. We're definitely open to hearing what you all want to learn about too.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, this was
How's
fun. This
that
was a lot
fun?
easier. This was my first live. This was a lot easier than I thought it
Was
was
it?
going to
I
be.
feel like we've done
Yeah.
one more historically, but it's been a long time.
Well, we've recorded and like had gab sessions like this, but I
Okay.
don't know if we went on to Instagram live. Anyhow, it doesn't matter. I got a client at 11. Do you have a
Yeah,
client at
I do.
11?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we're gonna wrap up. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thanks for
Um,
being here. See
yeah,
you next week.
see you next week. And if you're in Ohio, stay warm because it is
Mm.
absolutely frigid. So,
All right. Bye, y'all.
all right, see ya. Okay, let me try and end this bad boy.
Should I leave now where I'm just showing my lack of social media knowledge?
No, you're good. I think I can. Boop, boop.
Can you tell we're professionals?
I know. Part of me, I feel like, should I just like, can I just like close out?
Yeah,
Maybe that'll do it.
it should do it.
Um, cool. All right. We'll
Thank
see.